This is my first of the three videos, and the list of the three videos is on the screen that I'll be doing on the 12-day Israel-Iran war, where I believe Iran won. And I have three reasons for believing this. The first one is Israel, which initiated these operations on the 13th of June, its objectives for war, they were not accomplished. And they were regime change in Iran, and the second was destruction of Iran's nuclear capabilities and its military power. The second reason is that Iran's capability to fight an asymmetrical war, which it had acquired from China and Russia, came as a shock for Israel. Please remember that the last war that Iran fought, it was with Iraq, and it ended in 1988. And thereafter, Iran never fought a war, but Iran built its capabilities. On the other hand, Israel's capabilities, they were known threadbare to Iran. And the third reason is Iran was prepared for a long haul because it had the production capabilities of various types of missiles. On the other hand, Israel was not prepared for anything more than a short war, because we saw in the first week itself, reports started coming in that Israel was short of interceptors, and Prime Minister Netanyahu was keen to drag President Trump into the war with Iran. So the lesson here is never start a war without knowing the enemy's science and art of war, which is the enemy's capabilities and how they will be used. It's important. Now with this, let me talk about the first video that I am doing, which is to argue that Israel's regional military superiority got shattered in the 12-day war. And before I make my argument, please listen to this small clip of President Trump.
Iran, look, they've got a country, and they've got oil, and they're very smart people, and they can come back. Israel got hit very hard, especially the last couple of days. Israel was hit really hard. Those ballistic missiles, boy, they took out a lot of buildings. And they've been great. Bibi Netanyahu should be very proud of himself. And they've really been great. But they're not going to be building bombs for a long time.
It is clear that Iran's military strategy has 5 lines of offense. The first one are the Iran proxies. We know that Hezbollah and Hamas, they have been sufficiently weakened over a period of time, but the Houthis in Yemen, they still remain a potent force with a capability and resolve to support Iran when needed. In the 12 days, the Houthis fired a drone and they fired 3 ballistic missiles. So this threat that they give to the shipping in the Red Sea and the Strait of Bab al-Mandeb is real, and so this first line of offense of Iran is very much there. The second line of offense of Iran is the Iran option itself of a blockade of the Persian Gulf. Now Iran has the capabilities, it has the mines to put them at the seabed, and it has hundreds of small boats, and it has midget submarines, something like 24. Now midget submarines are very small submarines that operate very well in the shallow waters of the Persian Gulf. When you put the torpedoes and the anti-ship ballistic missiles on the midget submarines and the small boats, they become a very potent force, and therefore this line of offense of the Iranians is very much there. The next line of offense are the American bases in the Middle East, where something like 50,000 of American troops are there. This used to be at one time the deterrence of the US military in the region, but after the 12-day war, it has become a vulnerability of the Americans. And we saw that the Iranians fired 6 ballistic missiles on the air base, American air base in Qatar. Of course, this was stage managed, but the next time it may not be so. So it is now a vulnerability of the Americans, and I won't be surprised if President Trump, as part of its reduction of forces, the American forces may reduce the forces in the Middle East. But for the Iranians, this is a very effective line of offense. The next one are the capabilities of the two sides in the virtual domain of war. Now this is very important, and what I noticed it that the Iranians had a comparative capability in the virtual domains of war to the Israelis, which is good news for Iran. Now it all started with the cyber capabilities. You all may remember that the first software weapon to damage the physical infrastructure, it was created by the Israelis and the Americans called Stuxnet in 2010, and it was used to damage the centrifuges of the Iran nuclear program, and something like 20% of these centrifuges were damaged or destroyed, and the whole program of the Iranians nuclear program was pulled back by a couple of years. Since then, the Iranians have paid a lot of importance to cyber, and with help from China and Russia. Then in electronic warfare also, the Iranians had good capabilities, and as far as space is concerned, whereas the Israelis used the American GPS, the Iranians used the Chinese Beidou for their precision firing. As I have repeatedly said, these three virtual domains of war are the key to being in the war, to being in the game, which is the electromagnetic spectrum or the electronic warfare, cyber and space. So Iran has those capabilities comparable to the Israelis. Now the last one and the most important one is Iran's asymmetrical warfare, its capabilities and its how it will use them, the tactics of it. Now this, as I said, is not known to the Israelis. So let me start by first seeing the strength of the Israelis in this 12-day war. Without doubt, the Israeli Air Force, given its technology superiority, is one of the finest air forces in the world. And the Iranians are nowhere a match to the Israeli Air Force. Now we know that American personnel, they are in Israel, they were helping with the ISR, with the integrated air and missile defense system, in addition to so many other support systems, they were there. So when President Trump said that the Israeli Air Force had control of the sky, which is what we call air dominance, it was a reality. The problem here is that when you have two adversaries like Iran and Israel, which do not have contiguous borders but are separated by a distance of something like 1,800 kilometers as the crow flies, air dominance becomes meaningless. Air dominance is important, for example, between India and Pakistan, which has contiguous border, and which is why during Operation Sindoor I emphasized that the air battle of the 6th, 7th May night was absolutely important, because of course between India and Pakistan, since they are pure military competitors, air dominance may not be possible, but certainly air superiority can be achieved by one side, and whichever side achieves the air superiority, it creates a passage for the faster movement of its land forces or the army, which is not the case here between Israel and Iran. As I said, the borders are not contiguous. So while the Israeli Air Force did have complete air dominance of the sky, the thing is that it is immune to the missiles that the Iranians had. When you fly the missiles, missiles have nothing to do with the air dominance created by the fighters. So the Iranians had built this capability and this strategy over a period of time. On the other hand, because there were so many of the missiles which were coming from the Iran side onto Israel, and Israel we know is a very small area, it is 1/10 the size of Iran. So there was a huge pressure, densely populated, a lot of vulnerabilities in that small area. So there was a huge pressure on the Israeli integrated air and missile defense system. This was one reason for the pressure, and the second was, of course, the Israelis were not familiar with the tactics of the Iranians as to how the Iranians will use their missiles, how they will mix up the drones, the older missiles and the new missiles. So there was a lot of stress on the integrated air and missile system of Israel, which is a good system. When we see it is a multi-layered air defense system where they have the Iron Dome, which is to cater for the short-range missiles and drones. Then there is David Sling, which is a joint system made by the Israelis and the Americans, which is to cater for the medium range missiles. Then there are Patriot batteries of America, and then the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3 missiles of the Americans, which is meant for long range ballistic missiles which go in the exo atmosphere before coming back to the target. So now the problem here was, as I said, that the change tactics and the pressure which was there. So the news came within a week of this 12-day war that the Israeli side was short of interceptors, and Prime Minister Netanyahu was very keen on getting President Trump into a war, direct war with Iran. All this happened because the Israelis were not fully aware of the capabilities of Iran and how they would use the capabilities. Now let us have a look at the capabilities of Iran. Now Iran has a huge area, as I said, 10 times the size of Israel. So they were first of all dug in very well because the capabilities of Israelis and the Americans, they were known. So their facilities, their nuclear infrastructure, their the production, missile production capabilities, their missiles, they were all dug in. So they had done it very beautifully across the whole of their landmass. And then having learned perhaps a lesson from the Chinese, the Iranians, they focused on various type of missiles. The cruise missiles, the ballistic missiles of various ranges, and then the hypersonic missiles, against which there is no defense. And it is not a coincidence that there are only 3 countries which have hypersonic cruise missiles, which is China, Russia and Iran. So the point to make here is that not only the capabilities, how to use those missiles, much was learned by the Iranians from the Chinese. Please remember that it was the Chinese who in the 50s they decided to focus on the missiles, and they got a lot of capabilities from the Soviet Union. And then when they did their nuclear test in 1964, their vector for the nuclear weapons was their missiles. And today when we look at the missiles of the Chinese, they have a variety of missiles. They have the largest inventory of missiles anywhere in the world, which is now under a separate force which they call the rocket force. Similarly, what we see in the Iranian system is that the Iranian Air Force is separate from Iranian Air Defense Force. Now, Air Defense Force looks after the integrated air and missile system of the Iranians, where they have the radars, they have the anti-aircraft artillery, and they have a lot of surface-to-air missiles. There is no doubt that much improvement needs in their integrated air and missile defense system, which I am obvious they will do over a period of time, because they also would have learned their lessons. The Iranians would have learned that. They would also need to strengthen their air force, especially for the counter-air operations, and an ideal platform could well be the Chinese J-10C, which gave a good account during Operation Sindoor between India and Pakistan. So the point to make is that Iranians not only have these different type of missiles, and they are in hundreds, they also have a production capabilities. So when I look overall how the picture is, then it is something like this, that the Iranians, they have a surge capability of missile production, a focus on missiles of different type of missiles, something that the Israelis never did that. Then the Israelis did not know the tactics, how the Iranians will use their missiles of different types. And the Israelis would still be wondering if there are some more missiles, which is what we call the assassin's maze, which is about operational surprise, that the Iranians have not shown, and they would come perhaps in a longer war.